What would my life look like if I were firing on all cylinders? What would your life look like if it were all systems go, if we just did it all out? Tonight we come to celebrate those who went all out, fired on all cylinders, where all systems go. And we remember that Francis, the one who came to us from Assisi, was the very best version of a human to come from Assisi in his time. He just did it so beautifully. And Joan of Arc, she showed just as much courage as a person could. She left it all on the field. Juan Diego, Teresa of Avila, Mother Teresa, the list goes on and on. And it's interesting that the advantage we have of all the saints' lives is that we get to look back and see the whole picture. There's no part of any saint's life that we can't look at because it's had its completion. And that happens here about 75 times a year, give or take. 75 is the approximate number of people we send home to God at St. Mary's in a year's time. And you're looking at some of the faces of those who went home this year and earlier years. And it's when we look at their lives from the farthest vantage point, from 30,000 feet, after they've had a beginning, a middle, and an end of this journey, that we get to see just how beautiful their lives were. And what's interesting is, even in a life that doesn't fulfill its potential for all the years the person is alive, so often there is a chapter in each person's life where they really fired on all cylinders, when they really approached their potential. And getting to see that, getting to experience that, brings us tremendous joy. I think of some of the people that come to mind, like the mother of a disabled son who had to say goodbye to her child this year. He was an adult, and she had been with him every day of his life for decades. She said when he died that she felt so lost and empty, but she knew that if she had predeceased him, it would have been worse. She said he would have been so confused and so sad. And I realized when I sent him home to God, it was my proudest moment. I knew that I'd walked him all the way home. For a mother to say that. Blessed are those who mourn, Jesus says, and those people are around us. I think of a man that I knew who worked in a bank that had gotten robbed. And the robber was a local man, and he was arrested and went to jail. While he was serving his prison sentence for robbery, his wife and his kids were in turmoil, and they couldn't pay the mortgage anymore for obvious reasons, and they were about to lose the house. One of the bankers heard about that and contacted that wife and said, "Come on in, I want to talk to you," and invited her into the bank that her husband had robbed. And he worked out a plan for them to refinance their house so that she and her kids could stay in their house throughout the rest of the time that the bank robber was serving his sentence. The man who worked at the bank did that for the wife of the bank robber. Blessed are the merciful, right in our midst. We had a very difficult loss this year of a young person who died right around 20. And he was such a lover of animals. This person his life was devoted to animals. He loved pets, but he also had a special care for wild animals. And one of the things he did out of an overflowing of tenderness was he buried roadkill. When he would see an animal on the side of the road, he would go there in pretty much whatever condition it was in and gather it up and put it in a shoebox or a copy paper box and take it for burial. And at his funeral, his mother said, not long ago, he had found a possum who had met a misfortune on the roadside, and he gathered up the possum and put it in a box, and it was only when he did that he realized there were 6 living babies in the pouch, and he saved their lives. Blessed are those who are righteous and spend themselves doing the right thing. One of the lessons that we learn from getting to know these people in this way is that it's never too late to turn your life into something beautiful. No matter what phase of life we're in, it's never too late to make the chapter we're in a beautiful chapter, to do something really beautiful for our neighborhood, or for a family member who's in need, or for a child who needs a mentor. It's never impossible to do that. And what we're asked to do is to take a page out of the book of the saints and say, God, what would be the most beautiful thing for me to do in this situation? It's almost like a beauty version of WWJD. What would Jesus do right now? What would be the most beautiful thing that I could do with this misfortune in my business or my family, with this loved one who's struggling with a disability, with this compassion and empathy I have, which sometimes makes me hurt? There's just endless ways to do this. We buried a woman in our parish this year who had spent her life quietly doing something that no one realized. Her life's mission, on the side of all the other things she did, was to read through the obituaries every day. And usually once or twice a week, she would read an obituary for a person who had no survivors. And she would write down the information, and she would put on a black dress, and she would go to the funeral home for that person. Sometimes she was the only one there. And the funeral director would say, I didn't think this person had any survivors. How did you know this person? And she said, I'm a friend. And she would sit there sometimes as the only person in the room while they did the service. Or she would go to the graveside and she'd be there, even if it was going to be a silent burial, just to be there as the burial happened. When it was over, she'd go home, change her clothes, and go on with her life. Perfect strangers. It's never impossible to do something beautiful with the time we have. And the saints among us show us that in a particular way as they join us in following the saints that all of us know about. May each of us be willing to ask ourselves, what beautiful thing could I do today to come closer to reaching my full potential?